I just want to also introduce this masterclass, which is the first hybrid masterclass, and we're so honored to have Jamie as the first maestro. And we are going to be launching U Skills Hub at the end of the transformative research exchange, which is now happening in the Seaside Center around 4:00. So this master skills is the one of the 4 pillars of the U Skills Hub. So I would like you to think how you could be part of this online platform, U Skills Hub, in the future. Probably masterclass, maybe you can have something to share as masters among the youth to be part of this global challenge adventures. So with this, I forward the floor to Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to do a quick time check. So what time do I need to basically stop talking? Or can I just keep going in 20 minutes? Okay, I'm going to condense 45 minutes into 20. So I'm going to speak a bit faster, I think. And for those that English is a second language, I'll try and enunciate as much as possible. But yes, I'm Jamie Cromie. You've heard a bit about me, and I've started a business which is all about fighting food waste. And giving you a bit of a flavor into Too Good To Go, we are a registered B Corp. And what this means is we're a business which aligns profit alongside purpose, people, and the planet. But we're a mission-led organization with a clear vision, which is, that we dream of a planet with no food waste. And I'm going to, next slide, please. Okay. In case the slides don't move along with me, I can talk with my slides here as well. So our mission, it centers around inspiring and empowering, everybody to fight food waste together. And the reason, I talk about, this notion of inspiring and empowering, I talk about, inspiring, it's great. We've got to educate people, let them know that reducing food waste is something that is super impactful for them to do. But educating can only go so far. We need to empower people. We need to give people tools to be able to enact on that, to feel empowered to do something. I use the analogy of let's talk about car traffic accidents. We all know we should be wearing a seatbelt, yet there are thousands of people who get into traffic accidents on a daily basis. We know we should be wearing our seatbelts, but knowing that doesn't go far enough. We have to give these people these tools. So as an organization, we have a clear Northern Star as well here, which is about proactively contributing to SDG 12.3, which is a 50% reduction of food waste by 2030. And the reason why, and if we move on to the next slide, is because food waste is such a huge issue. Now we've got PhD candidates, we've got people working in government. So I'm sure many of you will know this already, but 40% of the food that we produce is being wasted, 40%. I've said this figure countless times. I've got to say it never gets any less shocking the more times I say it. And the reason why 40% is such a huge issue, if we move on to the next slide, is because it has a profound impact from a financial, environmental, and social perspective. If we move on to the next slide. So financially, food waste is costing the global purse about $1.2 trillion every single year. I think this was, for those that were at the pitches this morning, we spoke about this figure as well. $1.2 trillion. I don't know about you, but I can't contextualize that at all. So it's really the equivalent of the world's 15th largest economy, Spain. So we're spending more on throwing food away than Spain's entire gross domestic product. Again, it doesn't really seem to add up. From a social perspective, we've got 870 million people who are going to bed hungry every single day. So the real fact that we're wasting food is that true injustice here. But I started to go very much from through an environmental lens. And food waste itself accounts for 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. What this means is that if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter after the US and China. So if we move on to the next slide. And really the reason why food waste is such a huge environmental issue is because when we're wasting food, we're wasting all of those resources which have gone into producing it. It isn't just that plate of food in front of us. It is everything that has been created in the production of that. So it is a waste of that land which has been changed. If we think of something as simple as a slice of bread, we've got to convert woodland into farmland. For a single slice is about a 700 centimeter square patch of land. We're then wasting the labor which is used to perhaps sow those seeds. It's a waste of the fertilizer which is then placed onto our land. Again, if we go back to some of those pictures earlier today, we learned about how fertilizer is damaging our local water systems. So all of the environmental impact here. So waste of the water. Using that slice of bread example, we're probably going to use about 250 liters of water to produce a single slice of bread. So all of that water is wasted. So waste of that fuel, which is used to deforest our land, that fuel which is used to transport that grain crop from the farm itself to the mill to convert it into flour. So waste of the electricity, which is used to bake that slice of bread. A waste of the electricity to store our food, whether it be in refrigerators or otherwise. So again, when we're wasting that slice of bread in front of us, you think of it not just as that slice, but everything that has gone into producing it. If we move on to the next slide. For me, this is the most powerful slide I think I could ever present. It's the fact that, reducing food waste is the number one action that we can take as individuals to limit global warming by 2 degrees by 2100. And the reason why it is the number one action, and isn't just me saying this, it's the scientists at Project Drawdown, is because it's the most immediate. Reducing food waste is the most impactful, and it's also the most simple. So if you were to reduce food waste, it ranks above, switching to an electric vehicle, because the environmental impact becomes so much more immediate. It ranks above transitioning to a plant-based diet, because again, it's a lot more simple for us to do that. It's above things like LED lights. It's above smart thermostats. It's above carpooling. Now, we should still do these things. But again, it's just that reducing food waste is that number one action. We just move on to the next slide. Now, if we look at our food value chain, after the farm gate, 55% of our food waste is happening within our very own homes. If we look at this from the angle of Too Good To Go, we can start seeing how can we as a business start delivering impact across this food value chain. So if we move on to the next slide. And what we've been able to do is to effectively address food waste across this entire food value chain. We've got our marketplace model, which allows us to work with restaurants and food service. It allows us to work with retailers. And by virtue, it allows us to deliver impact in households as well. We've started a magic parcels business, which is delivering food straight from manufacturing facilities, just like Nestle, straight to people's homes, full of products, which was destined for the bin. And we've also introduced date label initiatives, again, working with organizations like Danone or Unilever or Nestle as well. I promise you, she hasn't paid me, to print labels on pack, which encourages to use our senses and understand best before date labels and best before dates better. So if we move on to the next slide. So I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to go really fast through this bit, but really in essence, what we've been able to do is to create simple solutions to complex problems. Our food system is inherently complex. We have something like 1 billion smallholder farmers across the globe. I think to the gentleman there who was asking the question about regulatories, I think one of the reasons why there hasn't been enough regulation and legislation on food waste is because it is inherently complex. It's much easier to legislate on electric vehicles or combustion engines because those supply chains are much, much smaller. So we have made reducing food waste and fighting food waste something which is simple and something which is accessible. So if we just switch on to the next slide, and this has allowed us to rescue 300,000 meals on a daily basis, 270 million meals since our inception, or 3.5 meals every single second, by creating a simple simple process for businesses and consumers to fight food waste together. We just skip on to the next slide. And the reason we do this is through our surprise bag. And this is often our USP. It makes something like fighting food waste fun. If we skip on to the next slide, it's what we often term a triple win. There's clear value here for the consumer who is able to rescue food at a more affordable price. A business is able to recover those sunk costs, and it's good for the planet. So social impact businesses are a way in which we can correlate commercial success straight with environmental and social impact. So if we just skip this next slide, and we can move on through this one. I've been told I have some extra time, so thank you. And if we look here, this is some of our impact to date. So we've rescued 270 million meals from going to waste, with 80 million consumers and 130,000 food businesses. And we're working with the likes of 7-Eleven, the Carrefours, the Starbucks. And I don't show this slide to show off, but I show it to show how even big business is wanting to work with social impact business. And so for me, this is hugely exciting that we're seeing this tidal shift in which sustainability is now on the forefront of everyone's agenda. You cannot be a public limited or publicly listed organization without seriously addressing things like food waste. But we've got there by creating these simple solutions, which are actionable for businesses of all sizes. If we just move on to the next slide. And I mentioned how we're working further down the supply chain or the food value chain with manufacturers and food producers. So we've developed, instead of a marketplace in which people go and collect food, a marketplace in which people are able to order food direct to their home. So this is a higher value sort of offering. But again, working with manufacturers and food producers to ensure that they have a scalable solution to reduce their food waste. And the importance here is that word scalable. Enacting solutions which allow us to reach people in different geographies and businesses of all different sizes. And if we move on to the next slide. I spoke as well, and if we go back to that slide of 55% of food waste happening within our very own homes. We've introduced our new label to work with food producers across the globe to show that you can use your common sense, you can use your senses, look, smell, and taste food, not waste it. If we think of Europe in itself, 10% of food waste in Europe occurs because of confusion around date labels. So how can we work with food producers? How can we work with regulators to try and alleviate some of this confusion as well? We move on to the next slide. Now, I wanted to touch on now and the importance of creating, impact at scale and how social impact business can help us to achieve this. I've sort of gone through a bit of a journey of Too Good To Go and the ways in which we've done this. So if we move on to the next slide, I think questions that we need to ask ourselves, and I've been told lots of the people in the room here are thinking of starting their own social impact businesses, or have already started theirs. I can see the people from Planet Mama, or Mama and Planet. But why start and create a social impact business? And I think the answer to this question is because you've identified a problem and you've wanted to create a solution. So this has to be something which is inherent to yourselves. It has to be something which you care about, because this is how you're going to drive that impact forward. If we just move on to the next slide. It's also really important for you to understand what that ambition level is. Are you wanting to do something on a micro scale, or is it more on a macro level? When I think of it from my experience and what we've done with Too Good To Go, for us, it's all been about building something which has the capacity at scale, because if we're able to scale something, we're able to reach more people, reach more customers, reach more businesses, and thus drive more value, drive more impact. But understanding that ambition that you have from the very beginning, I think can really stand you in great stead to be able to adjust and move on into whatever those challenges that face you. We move on to the next slide. And importantly, your solution is built to empower your end user. I spoke earlier about why we talk about inspiring and empowering. Being educated about an issue will only go so far. We know that the climate crisis is causing huge amounts of harm and damage. We've experienced here in Europe this very summer. Now, our friends in North America will have again experienced that firsthand. Our friends in South America this winter, went from -4 degrees in Chile to 40 degrees the following day. We are experiencing the climate crisis now. But knowing about it doesn't go far enough. So again, it's about making sure we can empower people. And it has to be simple for them to enact that change. So again, when you're thinking about your models, how can you empower these people? How can you keep it simple for them to digest and understand? We move on to the next slide. It's fundamental too that you're able to articulate and understand what the value you bring to that end consumer. When we think of it here through the lens of Too Good To Go, we know that we're bringing value and we're driving value to our food business partners. What we're able to do, and I skipped through that slide, but what we're able to do is to help them reduce their waste disposal cost. We're able to drive footfall into their businesses. We're able to engage their employees on the topic of food waste and empower them so that they don't have to throw food away that they've spent all day serving or preparing or working with. We're able to drive additional brand value to them. All of these additional things. So again, the question to yourselves is, what is the value that your solution brings to your end user? We move on to the next slide. And once we've gone through there, it's then having that introspective feeling on ourselves. What are those skills and competencies that we need to be able to drive a social impact business further? And I'm talking about social impact, but this can relate to any form of entrepreneurship or any form of leadership for that matter. But again, social entrepreneurship, I find, is integral for us to be able to address so many of the challenges that we face in society at the moment. So if we move on to the next slide. You know, when we talk about these skills and competencies, for me, like fundamental to this is areas like, you know, passion and commitment, you know, resilience and communication, prioritization, as well as agility. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we talk about passion. For those that saw me speak earlier, I said how important this was for me when I was starting my own business. But I also see that's so important for anyone starting their own social impact business, because it has to be something that you inherently care about. You know, that passion can be truly infectious so that others see your vision and want to go on that journey with you. You know, there's a reason why you've identified this solution. Oh, sorry, why you've identified this problem and started to create a solution. So make sure that passion becomes that fire in your belly that keeps you going. Because if we move on to the next slide, that passion enables you to stay resilient. When I think of the challenges that we've had with Too Good To Go, it hasn't been all smooth sailing. No social impact businesses, no business is smooth sailing. But it is through times of adversity where you have to be resilient. And that's where you grow as an individual, but you also really test what your model is like. You test what your business is like, what your social impact business is. You know, I think back to, you know, the pandemic. You know, that for us, as it was for everybody, a hugely challenging situation. Our marketplace suffered tremendously because so many of our partners just closed down overnight. With national lockdowns in you know, all of our 17 markets, it meant that the supply on our platform almost reduced to nothing. At the same time, so many of our partners couldn't continue to operate because of the financial stress that the pandemic brought. But it is through these times, you know, which is so important to build resilience, because it isn't all smooth sailing. And so it's growing towards this. And one of the ways in which you can build this resilience is by having a support network, which is why I think, you know, settings like this are so important, that you can build those networks of people who are going through those same challenges with you, that you can share those experiences, that you can help bring each other up. We move on to the next slide. Again, and that leans into the importance of communication. And when I talk about communication, it isn't just about standing in front of a lectern and articulating a pitch, but it's also about how you communicate that problem that you're addressing. You know, when we talk about it through the lens of Too Good To Go, I see that evolution on how, you know, we've talked about food waste and how we've talked about our solution. If you'd seen our pictures back then, there's a totally different story to what it is now. But communicating has been so important within that, to be able to bring people on that journey with you. And as your organizations grow, as your solutions get bigger, it's so important to be able to communicate with your team and communicate with your partners to really like demonstrate the value that you're bringing, so that you can keep still delivering that impact. We move on to the next slide. Within all of this, it's so important for us to prioritize. And for those that are, you know, the social entrepreneurs in the room, in fact, I think the students as well, who probably, if they're anything like me, can get distracted by all sorts of things on the internet or that shiny new thing in the room. But it is about prioritization. And here, you know, it's really important for us to be diligent and make those lists of, you know, what are those immediate tasks versus what are those urgent tasks. And though if it's urgent, if it's immediate, you know, that has to be on top of our to-do list. If it's urgent and it's not immediate, then, you know, we can do that later on in the day. If it's not urgent and it's not immediate, let's take it off our to-do list, because you're going to have a to-do list as long as your arm. So really important for us to prioritize. And finally, if we move on, it's about agility. I say about having clarity within your vision, but there's always going to be hurdles which come across, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's a change in the socio-economic system or geopolitical systems and status across the world. We'll often have to be agile to respond to that. But by being a young, early stage social impact business, that's one of the most exciting things, is that capacity to be able to change and respond super quickly. So whether, again, if it's a charity, whether it's a business itself, that capacity to respond. What you don't want to be doing is to drag your heels and not listen to what your consumers are saying, not listening to what your partners are saying, and so on and so forth. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I think some big learnings and reflections from me. So I've been on this journey now for 8-9 years, and there's so many things that I'd love to share with you. But I think there's a few top line here that I'll just reflect on. So if we move on to the next slide. It's so important to have that clarity in your vision. You know, what is it that you're wanting to achieve? What is it that you're addressing? Because with that clarity, you know, you can bring people on that journey with you. At the same time, it's so important to keep things simple. We have a tendency to overcomplicate again and again. But in a generation of TikTokers and scrollers, you know, we have the shortest attention spans ever. So let's articulate, you know, what it is that we want to do in the most simple means possible. We can start small. You know, we started at Too Good To Go with a very simple, you know, marketplace that allowed a person to rescue a meal from a business. And then from then we've developed into, you know, adding, you know, the Magic Parcels business. We've elaborated into expanding into partnerships with date label organizations. We started working with schools. We started working on lobbying and so on and so forth. But we had to keep things simple. And that in itself is about focus as well. You know, staying focused on what is going to drive that value in the immediacy. I talk as well about failing fast. You know, we want to be able to innovate. So you're keeping things simple. You're focusing on what it is that's going to drive value. But again, that value that you can drive, it has to keep innovating. It has to keep growing. So spending some of your time on new innovative ideas or new innovations, but making sure that the roadmaps of those are very quick. We're not talking about months. We're talking about days. We're talking about weeks, so that you can respond to these new innovations which you might be implementing. But at the same time, if it's failed once, it might not fail again in a year's time. So always remember that. But importantly as well, it's about enjoying the ride and checking in on yourself. One of my biggest regrets with Too Good To Go is I didn't take enough photos of these whole 8 years, because it's been a roller coaster. You know, there's been times which has been like the biggest highs ever, followed by head in hands with pulling out your hair. But it's so important to, you know, keep and build that resilience by celebrating those small things. And at the same time, it's checking in on yourself. Because for people in this room, you know, we're the ones that genuinely care about our food system. We're the ones which are trying to drive change. So we actually cannot afford to fail. Because sadly, there are more people trying to screw up the world, it seems, than are trying to save it. So enjoy the ride and check in on yourself. On that note, guys, I'm going to pause here, but I hope you've enjoyed the session, and I'll be around as well for some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jamie. Definitely, we saw your vision and mission through your passionate this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for being our master to tell us, what kind of things are important for entrepreneurship. I really like that, the solution built to empower end user. I think that empowerment part and also value addition, that we should be feeling for daily, action. What are we doing for the society, for the people we love around us? So it was just, so nice to hear. I think maybe 2-3 questions if you have something for Jamie to be responding, please.
Well, I think we've got a microphone there.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the presentation. It was great. My name is Pascal. I work for Doctors Without Borders. It has nothing to do with why I'm here, but I really enjoyed the presentation.
Great organization there.
Thank you. I work in communications, and my question, I guess, is when you started, who were like the people you needed first? You had your idea, you had your vision, but then who do you need to start to implement this? Who's your team? The core team together, like who did you bring in and why?
Okay.
In the immediate.
So I think there's two parts to that question as well. Who did we need to bring in first? And for us, it goes back to what I was speaking about, which is really identifying who that end user is, who that you're driving value for. And for us, even though we're empowering people as well, it very much cemented around the partners and the businesses which we worked with. So we had to get them on board first before we started communicating and speaking to a broader audience, specifically internally, and like who we brought on. Well, myself and my co-founders, we were bootstrapped, so we didn't really have the resources to bring people in. So it was very much ourselves wearing multiple hats. So in the morning, we'd be out there speaking with food businesses. By the afternoon, we'd be drafting our social media posts. Followed by that, we'd probably go out and speak to more businesses. Then it was speaking to the customers on any customer inquiries. And so it was this cycle in which we were a team of generalists wearing multiple hats. But as we grew and as we developed, as we scaled, there was the need to specialize in different areas and add additional layers of process and so forth, so that we were built and we had those core foundations to scale. Gentleman over there. Yeah, you.
Thank you for the presentation, Alexis, representative of Yango and Climate Use Delegate of Switzerland. I just wanted to ask you a question about the next step for Too Good To Go. We saw in your slide that food waste was still, at least in developed countries, very much on the household level. So how would you see like here a mission for Too Good To Go to try to enter households and to help them also at their home place? Because we know that we waste a lot of food also after the restaurant and by cooking by ourselves.
Mm-hmm. For the time being, there isn't a plan to create a solution specifically for households, but rather to continue to develop initiatives like the date label campaign that I mentioned. So giving more resources and tangible tools for people to reduce food waste in their daily lives. At the same time, we have a lot of communications which go out, giving people those tips and tricks on how to reduce food waste on a day-to-day basis. So whether that is understanding date labels, whether that's storing your food better, whether there's recipe development and so on and so forth. So lots of things that we're currently doing. I think for us to be able to drive that even further, and we look at why so much food waste is happening within people's homes, it's because fundamentally, we have a broken food system. The reason that we're wasting 40% of the food that we develop or the food that we grow is because our food system is broken. So it's less about, I see it as pointing the finger at households, but working on more holistic and comprehensive solutions that we can really like fundamentally change our food system itself. So going back to what I mentioned on the European Commission and encouraging them to introduce, mandatory food waste reduction targets which align with the SDGs. I think these are going to be ways in which we'll have that that trickle down effect into households as well. We have one more question at the back there.
No, fantastic. Thank you. I just wanted to mention two elements. The first one is perhaps a message that goes along very transversal to
Maybe
all the sessions.
Can you let us know who you are?
Oh, yes. Ana Herlín Hernández Bonilla, nutritionist. A concern I have is when we say, for instance, a broken system. I would like to remember how that broken system is there. Is us responsible of that? And that is something, a very important element that at times we forget to mention, and not to feel guilty, but feel responsible and accountable for that. The second element is I will appreciate to see a little bit more elements on the planning for not to having food waste and losses. And I at times like to hear this, and also like it also from organizations and innovators who want to address the issue, but they don't want to talk the nitty-gritty, the root cause that it is our behaviors, our attitudes, and those are the most sustainable areas and angles to address the issue of food waste and other related into the broken food system we have created. Thank you.
So a lot to unpack there, and I think I'll probably start with the reason why our food system is broken is because it's riddled with inefficiencies. We are wasting food all across the food value chain, as you see. And so what we need to be able to do is to make our food system much more efficient and much more resilient. We've seen with the transition towards a more regenerative farming, that helps to really reduce the amount of food waste. But globalization as well has played a part in food waste with like elongated supply chains. But I think within this whole topic of we as individuals, we have to pay some responsibility. I would perhaps challenge that notion, because we are a product of a broken food system itself. When we go to whether we go to the supermarket and it's the food on offer is a buy one get one free, that is something which is outside of our control. But again, we're a product of the food system itself. And from a nutritional perspective, again, we're consuming and purchasing these foods because they are there and offered to us. So I don't think it's so much about us being responsible for it, but rather there is an opportunity for us as individuals to start changing that. And we can change that through behaviors, through reducing food waste, but we can also change that through advocating for these things, ensuring that our elected officials represent our views within this space.
There's one question
Okay.
in the chat box. Can the too good to go model to be replicated in different forms of food service or distribution, such as supermarket, to further reduce food waste and redistribution of food surplus to consumers? So that's the question.
Sorry, could you mind repeating that question?
So your model,
Mm-hmm.
can it be replicated in different forms of food services like supermarket?
Yes, so we do work with supermarkets and retailers. So we work with all sort of food businesses, anything ranging from a local bakery all the way through to high street coffee chains, supermarkets, hotels, and food producers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much, Jamie. Please give him the pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for staying so long. It was fascinating for us to be here. So Jamie, thank you again. So everyone, once again, this is the first hybrid masterclass, and he's the master. We are really trying to have this masterclass to be continued for this year, next year. So please check out the QR code, which should be, yes, right here on the screen. And also, this is part of the Youth Skills Hub, which is going to be launched by our chief economist at the Sheikh Said Center, which is the one of the big room, right? When you come into the A building, the FAO building, there's a nice room. So it's now starting the award ceremony of the Transformative Research Exchange. So if you have time, please go there right now. And I think the launch will be around the 4 o'clock at the end of the session. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.